أهلا فيكي ديما، اندلفت وأخيرا قدرت ألقطك.
Are we ready? Not yet?
Dr. Ali, can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
We have 138. Would you like to start?
What number usually start? 139?
الصراحة إنه يعني إنه 140. There we go. Like now we have 142. So feel free to start.
Should we wait? Because it's a continuum, so you really need to.
Yeah. Would you like us to give them like 3-4 minutes more?
Let's reach 150. How many you said you have? 180?
140. We have 147.
Yeah, that's total number of students. How much? How many?
185, 190.
Okay. All right. Let's wait a few more minutes.
Okay.
Yeah. Let's start because I'm afraid that we will not be able to make it on time if we get late. Since we can.
Okay, Dr. Ali. We have 153 participants. I think that's fine.
Okay. So.
Okay.
شلون؟ يلا سهلة. We're gonna start now, okay?
Okay.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. I'm Dr. Ali Jaratli. I'm very, very proud to be with you this year. I've been teaching the psychiatry lectures for the last 4 years, and I'm very, very proud to be with you all the time and listen to you and try to help you. And first of all, you really need to attend all the lectures because psychiatry is a continuum. So if you don't understand the first lecture, it will be hard to understand the next one. They are totally one body. So please attend all the lecture regularly and just listen and you will learn a lot, inshallah. One thing about psychiatry, it's not like neurosurgery and neuroanatomy. Psychiatry is a lot of fun. So by the end of these lectures, I hope that most of you will enjoy psychiatry as something you like, not something you have to study. So you will enjoy it, inshallah. I decided to do the first lecture because in the last couple of years we didn't do this. So this will start with introduction lectures about how we look at the brain, because you know the brain is a huge organ, a lot of very complicated, the most complicated things that probably God had created. And we look at it in different ways: psychiatry, neurology, neurosurgery. Everybody look at the same brain in different ways. So hopefully in this lectures, we'll try to teach you how psychiatry look at the brain in different ways. And the main things really for me here is to teach you that psychiatry is really fun. It's not like I want to change these pictures, because before a lot of people felt like psychiatry is scary and something deal with majaneen or crazy people. It's not. It's really one of the really most interesting subject you can ever have. I really enjoy psychiatry a lot, and I think you will enjoy psychiatry. And psychiatry is really needed for you, even if you don't want to be a psychiatrist, even if you want to be a neurologist, eye doctor, skin doctors, even if you want to be a doctor. You know, psychiatry will teach you how to understand the human being, and this is what psychiatry is about. It's not about being sick or busy or anything. So let's start with mental illness. Mental illness is very common in our society and every part of the world. And now after the COVID-19, the percentage of people who had mental illness had tripled. worldwide because of this sitting at home and not having our daily activity in life. So it starts with the thinking. God had given us something called the brain. And the brain, especially the frontal lobe, is the one that we think and imagine think. So we have a lot of imaginary danger. We have a lot of stress about the future. That stress makes us feel sad and anxious and sometimes crazy. And then we behave in a certain way. So we need to find the connection between our thinking that cause our feeling, then cause our behavior. And usually that behavior, what we see in real life. So when we see somebody in the society who is behaving angry, behaving odd, behaving in a way that is not normal, it's affecting his family, his co-worker, his social network, all of that. So psychiatry or mental illness affect the whole society. If you have diabetes, it's going to affect you only. But if you have depression or anxiety, it's going to be affecting everybody around you, including your family and your wife and your daughters, and all people around you. So what causes mental illness? What usually causes mental illness? There is a lot of things. First is gene. If you have gene that cause depression or schizophrenia, then you're going to have those sometimes, not all the time. Then there is a stress of life. Stress of life like recent death, failure in the exam, like what's going to happen to you after this lecture. I'm just kidding. Serious illness like when you get sick and when you have trouble in the relation. So in this presentation, we're going to talk about all of this, and we're going to talk about stories. So I put a lot of stories so you can enjoy the psychiatry, because when we have stories and cases, it will stick in your mind forever, and we're going to see how. So first, in psychiatry, sometimes we have three brains, not one, but three. We have call it a trion. Trion means three. So we have the reptilian brain, that's the white one. And then we have the limbic brain, which is the love brain, L for love, not for Ledoux, it's for love. And we have the new cortex, is the thinking brain. So you need to understand this now. So we have reptilian brain, which is called the midbrain, or the brain that we share with all animals, even the snake and the lizard, all of them have this brain. Limbic brain is, and cortex is mainly, we see it in the human being. So limbic brain is where we love, we have social activities. This is where you love your mother, your father, your friend. This is where you love your significant other. And then the new cortex, or the cortex of the brain, this is the brain that we think. This is what makes us smart, and why God sent us to earth to make Amarat al-Ard, or make is a good place. So the two brain we're going to talk about today a lot is the limbic brain. This is, I put it in red so you can know that limbic brain is for connection, for love, for emotion. And then we have the new cortex of prefrontal cortex. So you're going to hear this BFC. PFC means prefrontal cortex. This is the first part of the frontal lobe. And in psychiatry, we're going to work a lot with these two parts. So please listen to this and understand it now. With the limbic brain and the prefrontal cortex. Some people call it the frontal lobe. It's the first part of the frontal lobe. So sometimes you might refer it as a frontal lobe, but it's the PFC, means the prefrontal cortex. The limbic brain is really where we have all of the emotion, behavior, motivation, long-term memory, everything is related to connection with a human being. And then the part of this emotional brain or limbic brain, this is where we get our anxiety, depression. This is when you hate somebody or you love somebody. This is when you have a good memory about something happened in the past and you store it there. The problem with the limbic brain, it's always active day and night. So even when you sleep, you have a dream. Dream is the work of the limbic brain. When you dream, the limbic brain or the emotional brain is working all the time. And that's, the limbic brain is really not logical. That's why when you dream, remember your dream last night, it was all illogical. We call it bizarre. Bizarre means you can be flying to the moon and eating lunch on Mars and, meeting with different people at different ages, not logical at all. The frontal lobe is the part of the brain that makes us logical. The problem with us is really the limbic brain is controlled by the frontal lobe. So the frontal lobe is like the babysitter of the limbic brain. So for example, when I get mad or angry, it's the limbic brain. The frontal lobe usually tone that anger and anxiety and make me look at things in more logical way.
Dr. Ali, I'm so sorry to cut you off, but the audio is not really clear. Is it okay if you can just check the mic?
Okay, I'm checking the mic. What's wrong with the mic? I put.
Like, doctor, you sound very far away and almost شوية يعني.
Okay, let me get close to the computer. Is that gonna help?
Yeah, this is good. I think this is better now.
I'll put the computer near mine. So the role of the frontal lobe is really to make us more logical. The limbic brain, a lot of the time, is very illogical. Love is in the limbic brain. So when we love somebody, it's deep in the limbic brain. That's why we cannot control people we love. Why? Because it's deep in our limbic brain. So we said the emotional brain or the limbic brain is always working all the time. So, give you an example of this. When you have a baby, the baby like 6-7 years old, when they need something, they cannot express what they need. So they have temper tantrum. Temper tantrum means I have a feeling and I'm not able to convey my feeling. So usually when we have a feeling inside or emotion inside the limbic brain, we express it through the prefrontal cortex. For example, when I love someone, I write a poetry about her or send her flowers. So the love is in the limbic brain and the frontal lobe is kind of express that feeling. And that's why we always teach people how to express your feeling. For example, in America, in the elementary school, every day they have something called show and tell. So you bring a toy with you and you tell your friend how much your toy make you feel, how is your feeling toward that toys. All of that is to teach you how to communicate between the limbic brain and the frontal lobe. That communication between them is very essential for a human being. That's why we ask children to write poetry, to write story, to draw something, because we want to see if this feeling you have inside your limbic brain is being expressed well in the prefrontal cortex. So usually when women cry, for example, you see a lot of women crying after they have some element. When they cry, that's mean I have a lot of emotion in my limbic brain, but my frontal lobe is unable to express those feelings. So when that's happened, we start being anxious and cry all the time. So that's what we do therapy. Therapy is trying to teach patient how to express those feelings inside the limbic brain through the prefrontal cortex. So here is our frontal lobe or prefrontal cortex is our babysitter. This is where we self-control our emotion. So the limbic brain have risk-taking, emotion, reward, pleasure, impulsivity. The role of the frontal lobe is to control these emotions so we cannot get overboard. For example, when I get angry, that's mean I have a lot of emotion in my limbic brain. The frontal lobe's role is to decrease that anger or make me angry in a way that it will not destroy other people around me. That's why when we have patients who have anxiety or depression, those patients usually they don't have good communication between their frontal lobe and the limbic system. Let me give you an example of that. Give you an example is much easier. So let's see, a few years ago, about 3 years ago, I was doing summer course at Al Faisal University. And I came in the summer to do lectures. It was hot and it was really, I do it just to teach and help student out. So on the way to the Al Faisal University, my car started doing some smoking. Apparently the air conditioning in the car could not tolerate the hot summer city in Riyadh. So when the car starts smoking, my first emotion was I was angry. That anger is really in the limbic system. We say our first reaction always in our older brain. We say the limbic system is the older brain. So my first reaction was anger. Why? Because why I was in the world doing this for the Al Faisal, I should have stayed at home. I have no business going there. So all of this emotion of anger start happening inside my limbic system. Then the frontal lobe's job here is to analyze the situation. So it will come and say, Ali, why you are angry? Well, I'm angry because, you know, this is all self-talk. My car had broken and it's smoking and I'm angry at that. So the frontal lobe is usually change the intensity of that feeling. So the frontal lobe told me, Ali, you have a good car. It's time to buy a new car. You can fix it. You have enough money to fix your car. It's not that deal. Be happy that it's just the car smoking. It's not your son who is smoking, or the car does not have any accident. So my frontal lobe toned down that anger, and I became happy and switch off that anger. So this is how normal brain work. First reaction when you have any bad news is in the limbic system. You failed exam or something happened, and then you are angry and uptight. Then the frontal lobe said, okay, wait a minute, let's analyze things, let's do this, and then it will tone down that anger and become normal. Now, this is a normal individual. An anxious patient, the problem with anxious patient, their frontal lobe or PFC, prefrontal cortex, is not able to do that. So they have exaggerated response. Their limbic system is working way too much, making you very, very anxious. And the frontal lobe is weak enough that it will not be able to tone down that anger in the frontal lobe that you have in the limbic system, and make you a little bit more edgy and nervous. So for example, the first part of the limbic system that really we have concern about is really the amygdala. We're going to hear a lot about the amygdala in the next few lectures. Amygdala is like our homeland security. This is like the limbic system. So like Saudi and Riyadh is the capital. So limbic system and the amygdala is the capital of that limbic system. So it's the part where we put our emotional memory. So for example, if you are driving a car and you are listening to some beautiful song and then you have a car accident, this memory will be stored in the emotional memory in the amygdala. Amygdala, where you store all of your emotional things that make you either too happy or too sad. It will be stored here in this amygdala. Then the amygdala's job is to keep you safe. Remember, amygdala's job is always like it Google the brain every second to make sure, am I safe? This is the big question for the amygdala. Am I safe or not? If I'm not safe, then the amygdala will trigger something called the HPE axis or the hypothalamic pituitary axis. So when the amygdala sense any stress, it will hijack the brain. Hijack the brain, it will make all the brain on alert so you can face that danger. So amygdala's job is to protect you. So it wants you to be safe and sound. So whenever it senses any kind of danger, it will make you immediately up and make you always on your toes, looking for survival. Remember, amygdala is like your mother, want you to be safe and looking after you and make sure everything is handy or quiet and everything is okay. If there's any dangers, it will make you very upset. And what happened when the amygdala hijack your brain, then you cannot think. Remember, we said the frontal lobe is the thinking brain. PFC is our thinking brain. And amygdala or limbic system is our emotional brain. So when the emotional brain see any dangers, it will hijack the thinking brain. That's why if you are fearful, you cannot think. If you are anxious, you cannot think. That's why we said stress make you stupid. Why? You see a lot of students, it always come to my clinic. Doctor, I'm very smart. I study very well. I go to the exam, I fail. Why? Because when they sense that feeling of anxiety, feeling of stress, then the amygdala sense that feeling, and then the patient frontal lobe will not work. His PFC to stop working. Why? Because it was hijacked by the emotional brain. That's why when we are anxious, when we are fearful, we cannot produce anything because our thinking brain, our brain that God gave us to think and discover everything, is hijacked by this emotional brain. And that's why always we need to free our cortex. Always free your cortex. Let your cortex free so you don't have to worry about anything but studying. If you have anything in the background, then your ability to study and function and succeed will be impaired. Some people, those what we call emotionally intelligent people, even they have a lot of stress, they can keep their thinking brain intact. And you see a lot of these patients, this is what you call emotional intelligence. So people with emotional intelligence, they might not be as smart as anyone else. Their average IQ is normal, but they are more successful than anybody else. Why? Because they are able to keep their emotional brain from hijacking their thinking brain. So under stress, they work very well. Under fear, they work very well. This is what we call the people who succeed in life. It turned out that people who succeed in life, not necessarily the people who had very high IQ. No, they are the people who had very high EQ, which is emotional intelligence. That means they can keep their brain or frontal lobe intact without being hijacked by the emotional brain under stress. So remember that we hijack our brain looking for survival. Now, we're going to talk about this a little bit later. Okay. So let's see the amygdala. The problem with the amygdala, why it's so important, why it's so vital, because it has connection with everything in the brain. It's like the security of the brain. It has circuit with every part of the brain, like Googling the brain every second to make sure everything is okay. So what is the part of the brain that had connection with everything else? It's the amygdala. Amygdala has more connection with the brain than any other organ. And that's why, if you remember, sometime when you are in a party or in a meeting, you will remember the most is the person who make you either laugh or cry. Why? Because when you have high emotion, the amygdala tend to remember things more, and always, like if give you an example, you always remember the day when somebody important died, or when you get married, and when you get in love. All of these important days, because it have very strong emotional connection, they will keep in your amygdala forever. Why? Because they have high intense emotion. So remember, you are a product of your subcortical emotion. So we said our emotion is in the amygdala here, and they are trigger our feeling. So feeling is a product of your emotion. So for example, if the amygdala give you good memory, then you feel relaxed. If the amygdala keep bombarding you with sad, failing, death, a lot of sad memories, you're gonna feel sad. So we are a product of our emotion. Our emotion is simmer beneath the threshold of awareness. Remember, the amygdala is back in the deep unconscious mind. So that's why this lady who we read here is really thinking and expressing her emotion. Her amygdala is giving her a lot of sad feeling, a lot of feeling of setback, a lot of feeling of bad memory. That's why she feel a little bit nervous, and she feel a little bit sad. That's why we always tell the patient to be attuned to your feeling. Remember, always you are a product of your emotion. So that's what we call self-awareness. Self-awareness, that's mean making you aware why they are feeling sad today, why you are angry today, teaching the patient how to connect between this feeling in the amygdala and your current feeling. That's why we said the most addiction we have is not addiction to drugs or alcohol. Our addiction to negative thought is our main problem in life. When we need to change that addiction by affecting the amygdala and tone down this emotional generator. So let's give you an example of that. Let's see Samih and Samiha. This is two patients. One is named Samih and one is Samiha. Samih and Samiha is having a very nice romantic dinner. And apparently supposed to be a very nice Valentine Day dinner. And during that dinner, Samih and Samiha had a very bad argument. Then the amygdala, especially in Samiha, record all what's happened in that dinner, including the music, the taste of the food, the smell of the food, the color of the tablecloth, everything had been registered now in Samiha's amygdala as very bad things. So after, few days, they get okay, they, everything went well, and went back to be a good wife and husband. 10 years later, Samiha saw a guy wearing this tie. And Samiha will immediately say, I really don't like this guy. I feel tight. And this is what happened is when the patient come to you, he said, well, I really don't feel good today, but I don't know why. I don't know why. That's mean I have in my brain, in my amygdala, registered that color as a bad things. But it's way deep in the unconscious mind. So I'm not aware why this is happening. It's happening, but I don't know why. So remember, the role of the amygdala is really to protect you. It's really to save you. So when the amygdala puts you in tight position, it's like something dangerous is going to happen. So you have to be prepared. So this is what the amygdala, because it's job to protect you. And this is what happened in depression. In depression, a lot of these people, depression and anxiety, feel tight, feel nervous, feel biqlaq. In Arabic, we say mashdood. Mashdood means I have a tense feeling in my heart, but I don't know why. This is all related to accumulated memory that is stored in the amygdala. So the amygdala is all about association between things that happen now and things that happened in the past that had very bad memory. So all of this will be stored in our limbic system called here, and especially the amygdala, that make you tense and nervous and very tight. This is all the amygdala, and this called the cue. The cue is what the amygdala remember thing that reminded you of that thing. For example, if you've been in a car accident and you were listening to Abdul Wahab or whatever singer, the next time when you hear the song, the amygdala will put you in a state of tense, because it will remind you that lyric or that music make you feel like you are in the going to have a car accident again. And it's not only for bad things, also for good things. For example, if you are working on the street and you are not hungry and you smell the food, whenever you smell the food, you start becoming hungry. Why? The amygdala have the cue that smell of the food reminded the amygdala that you're going to eat. And, remember, the amygdala want to save you, want to make you happy. So Samiha here, when she saw this guy who was wearing this tie, she became uptight, but she doesn't know why. And this is what happened in depression. Amygdala also trained since childhood. So if you have a very traumatic childhood, where you see your parents fighting all the time, this kid's gonna grow up to be anxious. Why? Because his amygdala stored, even in the unconscious mind, stored all of this fighting between his parents. And when he grew up, he became also very anxious, because his amygdala stored all of this information and inside his amygdala. So that's why we tell parents not to fight around kids, because what happened in childhood is going to impact you for the rest of your life. So this kid here is registering every fight in his parents deep in his unconscious mind, and it will affect him for the rest of his life. How we will record it is between the amygdala and the prefrontal cortex here. You connect this with the circuit between amygdala and the prefrontal cortex. And this is who defines who we are. Who we are is how much connection we have in the past experience between our amygdala and our frontal lobe. But the amygdala and the frontal lobe always does not work alone. They communicate with each other. So we call that connection or circuit. The circuit is, for example, I'll give you an example. Let's see, I get a nasty email. And that email make me very angry. I want to go and shoot at someone. That email make me feel very bad and angry is in the amygdala. Amygdala's first reaction, we said, is to make me angry, and I want to go and kill him. Why he sent me this nasty email? Then I continue reading this email, and it was from my boss. What's going to happen to this anger? It will slow down. Why? I will not be angry. I'll be happy and I will smile. Why? Because it's my boss. So the amygdala's first reaction is anger. The frontal lobe said, is your boss. You cannot be angry at your boss. Okay, so relax. So
This is how the amygdala and the frontal lobe work. The role of the frontal lobe is really to control the anger in the amygdala. So if you have a weak frontal lobe, like you see in anxiety and depressed patient, then this patient will be angry all the time. So the role of the frontal lobe is to calm down that amygdala. So the amygdala will not take over your action and it will not hijack your brain. So we call anxiety is, God always put balance in the brain. So when anxiety happens, that means these three parts of the frontal lobe, the medial prefrontal cortex, the anterior cingulate cortex, and orbitofrontal cortex, this is the three parts, you know, the PFC had many, many parts. One of them is these three. When these three cannot control the amygdala, then we become anxious. So anxiety is when the frontal lobe is unable to control the amygdala. So the amygdala will become very hyper and become very, very agitated. So anxiety is abnormal, effective top-down control, modulation of the anxiety. So the frontal lobe fail to control the amygdala. So if you have a question in the exam, what is anxiety? Anxiety is when the frontal lobe, this three part of the frontal lobe, fail to control the amygdala. Then we become anxious. And then our feeling control, our emotion control our thought. So God always have a balance. We don't want to have a frontal lobe without amygdala, and we don't want to have amygdala without the frontal lobe. You always have emotion. You cannot do it without emotion, and you cannot do it without the frontal lobe. So you always have to have this balance between the amygdala and the frontal lobe, so you will not be anxious or angry. That's why if you do a PET scan, for example, on patient with anxiety, you look at the amygdala here and it's red. This is a picture of the amygdala that is very hyper. So this is what happened in anxiety. In anxiety, the amygdala will become very, very hyper. It's not modulated by the frontal lobe here. So always amygdala is structure in the brain that connect to the prefrontal cortex. If that prefrontal region did not control the amygdala become very hyper sensitive and you become anxious and depressed. This is, for example, when we give medication to treat anxiety. This is the amygdala here in red. When we give medication like escitalopram, this anxiety and fear subside down and the patient will become calm and relaxed. I remember one guy, he told me that he used to drive on Kharis Road. He said, every time I drive, I want to get out of my car and go and fight with people around me because I'm so frustrated. After we gave him the medication where his amygdala subside, we reduce his amygdala activities. The next week he came, he said, I just drive and I don't care. People run after me, people, cross me, people say anything, I just don't care. This is how the antidepressant work by suppressing that hyperactivities in the amygdala. So amygdala, we said, is the part of the brain that make you fear and make you, that's why I don't sit near this lion. That's why I cannot go. A lot of people will have fear of a flight, fear of a snake. The amygdala is what does that to you. So I think this guy does not have amygdala. If he had amygdala, I'm just kidding here, this is a joke. If he had amygdala, he will not put his head in these two lines here. The amygdala is available in all the creatures that God created. So all creatures had amygdala. But it's different from one human being to animals. Like this rodent here, his amygdala is very simple. Is he gonna eat me or I'm gonna eat him? That's it. There's nothing else to the amygdala here. But in woman and man, amygdala is much, much more complicated, especially in women. In women, the feeling of the woman is so complicated. Why? Because they have very huge limbic system. Women's limbic system is very, very, very complicated. That's why women cry easily. Why they cry easily? Because their limbic system is so complicated that the frontal lobe, which is supposed to express those feelings, usually unable to do that. Why? Because male have testosterone. Testosterone usually kill most of the social emotional feeling in the limbic system, while the female does not have much of that hormone, so they have a lot of feeling. This is how God created us. That's why a lot of women, when they hear a song or when something reminds them of something, they cry easily, because all of these connections inside the limbic system become very, very complicated, and the frontal lobe cannot express those feelings. Let's go to the unconscious mind, and I think we need to hurry a little bit because we are short on time. So let's see, 1,000 or 5,000 years ago, this is my grandfather, Ali the First, my great-great-great-grandfather. He was walking with his dinosaur in the savannah. And suddenly he saw a bear. That bear is a really hungry bear, and really a big bear, and he want to eat. And my grandfather, as you can see here, look very delicious for that bear. He is so delicious. So the bear is gonna eat my grandfather. So that's why God, put something in my great-grandfather's brain called the thalamus. The thalamus is where the first pictures come, the first connection comes to the thalamus. Thalamus is like the railway or the rail station in the brain. Everything goes first to the thalamus. Thalamus immediately sends the signal to two places: the frontal lobe, prefrontal cortex, and the amygdala. But you can see here that the road to the amygdala is very quick. So the amygdala, we said, is the part of the brain that try to protect us. So the amygdala immediately know that this is a very dangerous creature, and my grandfather will jump and start running out of the bear. Now, the frontal lobe here does not interfere much. Why? The frontal lobe kind of want to analyze things and make sure everything is right. By the time the frontal lobe make decision, you will be launched for that bear. So that's why my grandfather, great-grandfather, listened to his amygdala, and he run and jump quickly, so he will not be eaten by that bear, and the bear will lose a very delicious lunch. This is how the brain worked 5,000 years ago. And the problem with us, we are misinterpreting this, because see, in our brain, we learn how the brain developed. Remember, the brain developed from back to the front and from down to up. So first we learn how to walk through the cerebellum, then we learn our emotion through the limbic system, then we start thinking. So the thinking brain does not mature until we are 25 years of age. So before 25 years of age, we are really mainly depending on our limbic brain, our emotional brain, our feeling brain. And then the older we get, then we get a little bit more of the thinking brain. We get engaged in the prefrontal cortex. That the prefrontal cortex, this is the human brain. This is what God gave us to think and build the universe by God. So we use our animal brain before we use our thinking brain. Why? Because we want to protect us. So if my grandfather want to use his prefrontal cortex, he will be eaten by the bear. Why? Because the bear is so quick and the prefrontal cortex is so slow. So my grandfather have to rely on his animal brain to escape from that bear. So he will not be a lunch for that bear. Same thing with my grandmother here, great-great-grandmother, where she saw the bear in the amygdala is where the fear center compare with the prefrontal cortex, and the amygdala is what make us sense that dangers and escape away and run away. So the brain amygdala appeared to be key modeling of the fear and anxiety. So all of these patients who had fear and anxiety have very high activities in the amygdala that trigger that fear and anxiety, and it was not well controlled by the frontal lobe. So and that's why we are using the same system like my grandfather used 5,000 years ago. Now we don't have any bear. I have not seen any bear in 50 years. So where is the bear now? The bear can be your wife sending me an email, something happened that make you upset, and we react same like we react to the bear. We are using the same system that God gave us to protect us from lions and snake and bear. We are using it in dealing with our daily stress. You relax at something and you become angry and you become agitated and you become fearful. Something mild things happen and you become very, very irritable and fearful. We are abusing that system that God gave us 5,000 years ago to stay away from bear. We are abusing it to deal with life stress. And this is a problem with anxiety and depressed patient. So the amygdala is the one that starts what we call the HPA axis. The amygdala sense that dangers, send a message to the hypothalamus. Hypothalamus send a message to the pituitary gland. Pituitary gland send a message to the adrenal gland, and we start secreting what we call these stress hormone. Stress hormone is cortisol, norepinephrine, and adrenaline. These stress hormone supposed to help us stay away from the bear, but we are using it for everything now in life. So something happened, your friend said something, your wife said something, your sister said something, and you immediately jump and you activate that HPA axis and make you extremely nervous and extremely agitated. Why? Because these substances are not supposed to be with you for a long time. They are supposed to happen only when a bear or a snake jump on you, not in regular life. But we are using it in regular life. That's why we have plenty of cortisol. And when we have increased cortisol level, remember cortisol is the main stress hormone. When we have too much cortisol, we have less serotonin. Serotonin is what makes us happy. That's why people under stress cannot be happy, cannot feel relaxed, cannot feel calm. Why? Because serotonin is the enemy of cortisol. When you have high cortisol, you have low serotonin and low dopamine. So you are stressed out and you cannot relax and you cannot feel calm because you stop secreting that serotonin, which is opposed by the cortisol level, and it makes you depressed. So this is what happened. We said, to summarize it, then the grandfather was using his HPA axis to prevent eating by the bear. Now we are using the same system in daily activity of life. So this bear can be a money situation, your kids fail in school, your spouse says something, you have problem in the job, and you activate that HPA axis. It's the same. Look at here. This is the work of a guy named Joseph Ledoux. Joseph Ledoux have a lot of these literature about this. Let's say you are in the wood and you saw a snake. The snake picture always go to the thalamus and then goes to the amygdala. The amygdala have the ability to connect with the heart and the muscle, so you can jump out and stay away from the snake. And here you use the low road, we call, not the high road. The high road is the frontal lobe. Use the low road or the HPA axis to jump out of the snake. And this is how God wants to protect you. This is the brain that protects itself from this creature. If we don't have this, we would have been eaten by snake and bear long time ago. So that's how God created this lower road called the amygdala road, so we can be protected. Here is now we are using the same thing for money, kids, and spouse. So your wife said something and you activate that amygdala. Your sister said something and you become very angry. You have failed in exam and you activate the HPA axis. And that's why we have this high level of anxiety, because once you activate the amygdala, you become very, very anxious. But why we use the amygdala always first? Because the limbic brain, we said, is the older brain. This is the brain we got way before we got our cortex. That's why we get used to it, and it always faster. So that's why we feel fear before we know recognition. For example, if I am walking in the desert and I saw a rope happen, my limbic brain immediately feel like this might be a snake, not a habal or a rope. So I jump immediately. Because the limbic brain, remember, want to protect me. So always limbic brain come first. And that's the problem in our food. For example, when you see the pizza, you will say, okay, Ali, you are overweight, you have diabetes, high cholesterol, you should not eat this stuff. But by the time my new cortex comes, I already came and ate the pizza. That's why it's very hard to lose weight. Why it's very hard to lose weight? Because our limbic brain, which looking for survival, knows that if you don't eat, you're going to starve. So we have learned through thousands and thousands of years ago that food is very high commodity, and if you don't eat, you're going to starve and die. That's why the limbic brain starts eating before the new cortex or the new brain come and tell you should not eat, you should not this, but it's too late. That's the problem with the people who had trouble with the weight gain. And then we had something called uncertainty. We're going to talk a lot about uncertainty in the next few lectures. The problem when we feel uncertain, we start using the limbic brain. So all of you medical students and a lot of these people here who doesn't know what's going to happen in the future. Am I going to be able to find residency? Am I going to be able to find a job? Am I going to be able to graduate, pass this exam? When we are uncertain, when we don't know where we're going to go in our life, where we're going to live, how we're going to manage our family, when things are not clear around us, we tend to use the limbic system. And we say the limbic system is a quick system, is not logical brain. The logical brain is the frontal lobe. And that's why in a lot of uncertainty, we use our limbic system, which is not a good system to use in this situation. Like, for example, here, Beth. Beth, we're going to talk about Beth in the next lecture, but just give you a quick look. Beth came to my clinic one day. She is a 30 years old, beautiful woman, gorgeous, smart, very highly educated, had 3 kids, in love with her husband. Beth came to my office with severe anxiety. She was not sleeping for 3 days. She was unable to eat. She was unable to relax. She is not taking care of her kids. And then what happened is, all of this happened all of a sudden because her husband sent a love letter, a love email to another female. That was devastating for Beth. So what happened in Beth, usually when we have a lot of unknown things, we start using our amygdala. Beth used our amygdala. Amygdala tried to use the frontal lobe. The frontal lobe, PFC, could not solve the problem. It's very hard for Beth frontal lobe to imagine that her husband will send this romantic letter to another lady. It was unimaginable for her. So when the frontal lobe cannot imagine this, she starts having panic attack. So panic attack happened when we cannot valence. Valence means understand why this happened. So Beth could not imagine my PFC or Beth's PFC, prefrontal cortex, cannot put things in perspective. When that doesn't happen, then Beth become very panicky and came with severe panic attack. That means my frontal lobe could not understand it. So she came to my office to use my frontal lobe so I can help her understand what's going on. And that's what happened with Beth here. So in psychotherapy, when the patient come to us, they come in crisis. Wow, this is happening. I don't know why this is happening. Please help me understand why he is doing this, why he sent this love letter, why he is in love with me, why he is doing this. Because her frontal lobe cannot imagine this will happen. So our job, we're going to see it in the next lecture, how we're going to help Beth understand what's going on. We'll keep it to the next lecture, inshallah. The same thing would happen with Samantha. Samantha is a lady who is in her 30s. Samantha is having psychotherapy with her psychiatrist. The psychiatrist, after the session, he tried to make her wear her jacket. This is like part of being nice in America, to help your lady when she leaves the office, to help her wear her jacket. And this is supposed to be very nice and being a gentleman to help the lady wear her jacket. But Samantha reacted in a very odd way. Samantha immediately became angry, agitated, she started flipping out. So the psychiatrist did not see anything and wait for the next session. The next session, he asked Samantha, what was going on? Why did this? Samantha is not aware of that. She didn't know. But after we did a very, very thorough analysis of her behavior, it was found out that Samantha had in her limbic brain, in her old brain, in her unconscious brain, Samantha remember that when she was 5 years old, her mother used to force her to go to school. and she will force her to wear her jacket. And Samantha does not want to go to school like most of us. So her mother used to scream at her, and Samantha will scream, and mother will force her to wear her jacket. So Samantha's brain registered that wearing your jacket, somebody helping you wear your jacket, is very traumatic event. So she immediately jumped unconsciously. She is not aware of it. So in psychotherapy, we make her self-aware. Why Samantha is acting this way. So this is what we do in psychiatry. In psychiatry, we try to do to understand why your unconscious mind is doing this, why you are acting this way, because something registered in your unconscious mind, in your amygdala. Remember, the amygdala is all about association between what happened to you in the past and what's happening to you right now. This is what happened to Samantha. That scary feeling. Oh, reminded me of my mom when she was trying to force me to wear the jacket and go to school. It brought all of these bad memories in Samantha's unconscious mind, and Samantha became very, very anxious and irritable. So our job in psychiatry to bring all of this memory from deep in the unconscious mind, to bring it to the frontal lobe, so the frontal lobe can, we call self-awareness, understand why I'm having this feeling, why I am depressed, how I can deal with depression, because they are coming from deep in the emotional reservoir. It's like an ocean of things, and you have to be careful in approaching that reward and in approaching that feeling. So
here we go. The frontal lobe is always like in Beth and Samantha is trying to valence what's going on and help us with the amygdala to deal with the stressful situation. I think we...
How much time do we have left?
We have 5 minutes before the next lecture.
Can we make it like 10? Is that okay?
I mean, doctor, the next lecture is your lecture as well.
Okay, so let me finish. And so then we're going to come to different part of the brain now called the orbitofrontal cortex. Orbitofrontal cortex is very important part of the brain. Orbito means eye. So orbitofrontal cortex is the part of the brain that's really above your eye. See it here. And that is very, very important in what we call self-regulation. This is the part of the brain that make you think before you act. It make you look at things before you jump into conclusion. That make you don't want to drink alcohol because alcohol is bad for you. That's the one that make you understand people, connect with people again, control your impulse, make you not use any drugs and alcohol, make you also, have good attachment to other people. And this is very important because it has to do with your mother relation. So if you have good connection with your mother, that part of the brain grow very well. If you don't have good connection with your mother, this part of the brain become very, very anxious, and you will not be able to soothe yourself and become calm and relaxed. So if you see a patient who is very impulsive, angry all the time, always ask about relation with the mother. If you had a good relation with your mother, this will not happen to you. So you see it in patient who had, for example, in the future, we're going to read about it, called borderline personality. Borderline personality patient, they tend to have poor attachment with their mother, so that when they grow up, they become very, very anxious and very, very impulsive and cannot control themselves with their anger and emotional feeling. And it also has to do with addiction. Let me jump quickly and head injury, because remember the orbitofrontal cortex is right above the bone. So any head injury will affect that part of the brain. That's why if you see patient with head injury, they tell you the main complaint of head injury, patient become very impulsive. Impulsive because their frontal lobe or orbitofrontal cortex is unable to self-regulate their behavior because it's damaged when you have head injury. We'll go quickly to the other part of the brain called Dlpfc. This is very, very important. Dlpfc, dorsolateral prefrontal cortex. This is the part of the brain that is responsible for your working memory. Working memory means your ability to deal with the daily activity of living. So all of you now your Dlpfc is working very hard to understand these lectures. So this is the part of the brain that is called the CEO of the brain. All the information has to go to this part of the brain so we can make good decision. This is a part of the brain responsible for your thinking process. It is integrating all the information that comes from the brain to this frontal part of the brain and make you have very good decision. This is a part of the brain that make you organize your thought and prioritize your thoughts. For example, should I do this or do this? How I can deal with complicated things like having a family, seeing patient, studying for exam, preparing for lectures. All of these complicated things is the work of the Dlpfc, where your working memory is there. The problem with this, if you have depression or schizophrenia, this part of the brain does not work very well. So you really need to take care of that part of the brain. One of the things that we take care of this brain is by sleeping well, because at nighttime we don't have any dopamine and norepinephrine in that part of the brain. But when we sleep, we refill our dopamine, so this part of the brain will have enough fuel or dopamine to function well. That's why if you have something very complicated and you call me in the middle of the night to solve any problem, I said sleep on it. Why? Because we cannot have a lot of thinking at nighttime. See, our God had put our brain at highest level during the daytime. See, from 9 till 9 o'clock at night, this is the highest level of dopamine and norepinephrine in the brain. This is where the brain functions very well. That's why I'm not a big fan of the night lectures, because your brain is not functioning very well because it doesn't have norepinephrine and dopamine. So the Dlpfc need dopamine and norepinephrine to function very well. And the highest level of dopamine and norepinephrine are during the daytime, not the nighttime. Let me jump quickly to the last part of the brain called the thalamus. The thalamus is the part of the brain that's responsible for what we call vegetative symptom of depression and anxiety. For example, control of the weight is the thalamus. Control of the appetite is in the thalamus. Control of sleep is in the thalamus. So this is a part of the brain in the hypothalamus. It's below the thalamus. So hypothalamus is like a group of nucleus that control appetite, weight, and sleep. For example, in the hypothalamus, there's a place called biological clock, or SCN, suprachiasmatic nucleus. The suprachiasmatic nucleus is the one part of the brain that's responsible for our sleep. So when it sees the light in the daytime, it will stimulate the brain, so we are awake and functioning. So it's kind of get the light from the eye, it has connection with the eye, it's get the connection from the eye, and it starts stimulating the brain so we can see things and can, be awake and alert. So this is we call circadian rhythm, responsibility of the SCN. At nighttime, because the darkness, the SCN will attenuate it, and then we go to sleep. And this is how God create this universe. We're going to talk about it in our sleep lecture, hopefully. Let me stop here. We still have a lot of things. I will leave it for you to read. And then hopefully we're going to try to talk about this in the next few lectures. So I will leave you here and we'll come back in about how much time we need to come back after?
Doctor, you have a lecture from 4 to 5, so we started the second lecture. If you would like to take 5 minutes break, it's up
Let's
to you.
take 5 minute break and then we'll come back at 4:10, okay?
Okay, and Doctor, I have a few questions I collected from the students, so if you'd like me to ask them at the end of the second lecture.
Sure.
Okay.